Hi, my name's Dwayne Waddell. I'm a rancher north of Cayucas in San Luis Obispo County, and I've been a cattle rancher here for 20 years. Grew up on a dairy farm, so I've been exposed to that kind of life. Recently, I've gotten into the grass-fed beef thing because, well, mostly because people have come to me and asked me if I would sell them an individual animal. I've always been raising the grass-fed beef as long as it's here because I don't use any of the antibiotics or growth hormones that they use when they do go into the feedlot. Economically, it can be advantageous for a rancher to go in this direction. There's a good market. There's a premium price. It's eliminating the middleman, and it's you're raising a healthy or selling a healthy product that doesn't carry along with it a lot of the disease-related problems that exist in the way that the beef is normally marketed. You're not going to find any mad cow in a grass-fed herd. California is usually considered pretty progressive when you come to these things like that. But I think Texas may have outdone us this time. They have a lot of these existing programs here, and you're going to see some of those programs now, so enjoy it.
Now, because we're feeding grain to our cattle, we have a super E. coli issue because E. coli has always been in meat, but when E. coli gets into our stomach, the acid in our stomach kills it. But when you have an E. coli that's adapted to acid in a cow's stomach, the acid in our stomach doesn't kill it. Cornell University has done a study on this. It's out for publication, and you can actually see the study. So we have a super E. coli issue now if you eat a grain-fed product, and you can actually get that from meat that is conventionally grown because it's used to living in an acid environment. Our product is a grass-fed product, and we did that because we found that our cows are a whole lot more satisfied year-round. Even in the wintertime, we go and take grass samples, and the rotational grazing system allows us to manage so that we have standing grass all year long. We don't cut hay for our animals. I usually have a few bales of hay just in case spring doesn't get here early enough and we have calves start hitting the ground and we need to do something to boost our mothers. But this year I didn't have any, so they had to make it on the grass that's there. We found that in the dormant native grass, we have anywhere from 7 to 9% protein in the native grass. It's not there in coastal. It's not there in Klein grass, all the improved grasses. It's there in the native grasses that are very, very diverse. And that's what those cows enjoy, and that's what they like to eat. They will eat the other, but when you give them a choice, they love the native grasses. They like the salad bar, like Joel Salatin talks about. They like the variety, just like we like variety. And they do very well on native grasses.
The thing that we're attempting to do, and I believe it's going to work, we just got started a few months ago, is bypassing your conventional production systems. Where you raise a calf, get him as big as you can get him, and then just haul him to the auction barn. Where you're really not rewarded for good husbandry. I mean, he brings the same per pound really as something that's maybe not had not been cared for properly. I also believe that there's an economic reward in caring for the animal humanely. My wife and I, and working with some people, we're establishing a source of red meat that's been handled humanely, been produced primarily on native range, but no antibiotics, no hormones, that kind of thing. And charging, and you charge a lot more for it, but you bypass your large packers, you bypass your large wholesalers, and to really capture that most benefit from that, you really need to sell directly to the consumer. I'm working with a group that they're going to handle animals humanely. They're going to avoid any antibiotics or steroids, but then they will go through a packing plant, a small packing plant, that won't have our names on it individually, but we'll have a brand name on it. One of the things I'm working with is going to be a regional thing. And I'm also going to try to attempt to do it just me individually, just our ranch. Or I am going to do it. I'm going to attempt to do it.
Having different species out grazing, they complement each other in terms of a parasite that influences one doesn't influence the other. So having sheep come in after cattle have grazed won't hurt them in terms of the cycle of parasites on the cattle. If the parasites are already in the cow dung, it won't influence the sheep. But they may, the advantage is you may have different species of plants out there that the sheep prefer that the cows didn't, and hopefully they will go eat those, and rather than them being unutilized or become a pest because you have too many of these weeds out here. So they complement each other in that aspect. As far as chickens, of course, chicken consumption has, I don't know where it is relative to beef, but it's grown a lot more than beef has. But those were also chickens raised much the same way beef was, in confinement in a factory setting, I guess. And so there were people that I was selling beef to that wanted a different source of chicken. In terms of producing chicken, I'm not. And I wouldn't think that any producer who does it like me out on pasture is nearly as efficient as those who do it in the factory settings. I can be somewhat price competitive with the supermarket on my on my beef and on my lamb, but chicken, there's no way I could sell for what Pilgrim's Pride and Tyson do, the pennies per pound that they get on whole chicken or the less desirable parts, the wings and whatnot. But there's such a disparity, I found, in terms of talking with my consumers. There's such a disparity between supermarket chicken and chicken raised out on the farm that they're willing to pay that extra price. That pennies per pound price doesn't make it any more attractive for them to go to the store.
Talking about the decay cycle as being one of the natural processes that we have to work with in nature if we're going to be sustainable. The dung beetle that has buried part of this manure pile and brought the dirt up through it, incidentally, there'll be enough farmers and ranchers in your audience that'll say that old boy is a very poor manager, simply because this manure is very fibrous, and they're absolutely correct. I was holding cattle on this particular area to utilize some old grass simply because we had to. We didn't have a choice with the drought. But can you see the life in that manure? You see the little grub worms working it? See them? Are you getting them right there, the little worms? This is a part of the normal natural decay cycle. It is what has to happen. Everything from the little fly larva right here to this little worm over here, whatever he is, the dung beetle, later on the earthworm will come up under it, the pill bugs will begin to utilize it. They will convert this waste product back into nutrients. Nutrients for soil organisms, and later on, nutrients for higher plants, which will in turn be converted into nutrients for animals. Life, death, decay. It's a never-ending cycle. And when you interrupt that cycle with something like the chemicals that sterilize this dung pat in order to keep horn flies from hatching in it, then we kill all of the life forms in that dung pat. We interrupt that cycle. Therefore, we waste these nutrients that are tied up in this manure. Instead of going back into the soil immediately to become food for microorganisms, later food for higher plants, later food for animals, it's a waste product. This is one of the things that we've lost touch with in modern agriculture. We have to work within nature's framework. We can push on nature occasionally. We can violate the rules occasionally, but sooner or later it catches up with us.
Some years ago, we had a neighbor in this area of western Ochiltree County who decided that he would go with Seaboard and put in 2 confined hog operations. Now, confined hog operation, the hog is always kept inside, never has his feet on the ground, never sees the real world, never does anything but turn around and eat and turn around and eat. That's all he can do. Sometimes he can't even turn around very well. But anyway, this is the latest method of raising hogs in this part of the world. And it started in North Carolina and is up east and has come to Oklahoma with Seaboard. And they grow about 8,000 hogs in each one of these 2 confined animal operations, which are small, actually. We have one in Ochiltree County now that has 325 to 350,000. And for each one of these hog operations, they have to have an enormous lagoon system. Now, they call it lagoon system, but what it actually is a cesspool. All of the waste is piped out into this pool that is open, and it causes a tremendous amount of odor. A lot of nitrates rise into the air. I have had more flies around here than you can imagine because the flies go to these places, of course. And it causes an awful lot of problems, and if they close these down and just leave those lagoons, then somebody has to go in and clean them out and fix them up after it's all been left. And that's what happens so often with these confined animal operations. If they close down, they just go off and leave the mess. They don't do anything.
Within holistic management, we do have a lot of our own vernacular, our own terminology. One of them is solar dollars. That is an attempt to help people understand and visualize that when, for the most part, all of our money, our paper money that we hold in our hand, can be traced back to somewhere to a natural resource material, a raw ingredient of some form. That's not so much true for totally service-oriented companies. But in terms of material goods, somewhere they started as a raw material. In agriculture, we grow food, we grow fibers, and we grow materials we can use for shelters. And that stuff is produced as natural resources out in the environment. And the energy that creates those eventual products all comes from the sun. And it's all captured in the form of plant material, and then from there converted. It might be converted into, that plant material might actually be a food crop. It might be grass, which could be converted into any form of livestock. That livestock then could be further converted into a food or a fiber product. It can be converted, of course, into materials like lumber and other materials that we might use for building and or shelter. But it all can be traced back to the sun we call solar energy. In agriculture, we have a blessing and a gift. We can harvest solar energy in a variety of forms, and without very little, with a relatively minimal processing, we can turn around and we can sell that to a consumer. And that solar energy is free to us every single day. We don't have to pay for it like you have to pay for fossil fuel energy to run a plant. So it's free gift. And with it we can produce material and goods that's essential for life. Food, fiber, and shelter. Now we're losing our capacity to do that in this country. And we're losing it from a couple of reasons. Environmental degradation is one of them, but urban sprawl and development is another one. And we're actually displacing very good productive land into development projects and or developed recreational places like theme parks and water parks and so on. And we're slowly losing our capacity to take that free gift of solar energy and to create a commodity and I hate to use the word commodity, but to create a good that's absolutely critical for living. And instead, we're giving that up for things that are not critical to life. And that's what the average consumer has no awareness of.
Our markets are kind of twofold. We have a big part of our probably half of our business is just selling a blank T-shirt, and this goes normally to screen printers or groups that are doing some kind of event, and they like the idea of organic cotton. Organic cotton has finally gotten to where people know about it. When I first started, most people didn't know, organic. What does that mean? It's alive, or whatever. But people know now that there's a product available, and they're not buying it. They're not buying it because they have a trouble with chemical sensitivity. Although we do have probably less than 0.5% of our customer base are people that can't wear anything but these kind of clothes. But they like the idea that it's cotton farming is chemically intensive, and this is an effort that is being made to have a little better product, and they like to participate in that, and they don't mind paying a little extra for the shirt. And then we have another line of our product where we put prints on, and we wholesale these into stores, mostly gift stores. And probably your customer they're buying the shirt because it looks nice and has a nice print, and then the fact that it's organic maybe is just an extra. That's not the number one reason they buy it. But then they get it, and we have a little tag that tells the story, and of course it's very nice, feels nice, and they like it, and we just get so many positive comments from our products, and but people, there is a large consumer base that supports the organic industry, and not only in this country but other parts of the world.
In our geographic area, we live in such a rural area that in the 1950s, when everybody else had phones, the phone companies didn't put in phones in our area. It was just not enough people for the value. So our phone company is a cooperative phone company. The people got together and formed a cooperative for the phone company. Our electric company is a cooperative. Our gins are cooperative gins. So the cooperative mentality is very strong in this area that a company won't do that. Fine, we'll just do it ourselves. So that mindset comes with being from here to some degree. So when people were calling And I was selling our bales, and then I was helping selling my brother-in-law's bales, and the guy up the road's bales. But you know, by the time you start talking to those guys over in Brownfield and Muleshoe, you just don't know who they are. And it's one thing to sell your neighbor's cotton, but it's another thing when it's people you don't know that well. And you need to start having some kind of a legal entity or a manner in order to facilitate those sales. Because the mills would pay me for the cotton, because they want to write one check. And then I would disperse the funds based upon the bales in that shipment to the farmers. Then there was the question of, are you selling my bales first or his bales first? So we all got together in my limited room one day, and we just put up all these different charts of what kind of legal entities we felt like needed to be there. A broker model, a merchant model, whatever. And at the end, it sifted out that we needed a cooperative. And so the cotton goes into a blind pool. It doesn't matter whose cotton it is. It's sorted out according to quality. And we sell the bales to the mills based upon what type of fabric they're making. For example, this fabric is, Pima ring spun cotton from very long staple in a fine count yarn. That's going to be one type of fiber quality. The type of cotton that goes into our cotton balls, you can't even spin it. It's unspinnable. It's so short. So we have a range of cotton in the cooperative. So depending upon the kind of cotton you have, it goes into these different pools. Those different pools have different markets based upon their quality. Then so as I sell the cotton in those various pools, depending upon what cotton your pool, what pool your cotton is in, then you're paid based upon your participation in where your cotton fits into those various pools. And it's been a successful model for all the farmers having fair and accurate and adequate representation. And it doesn't matter what size of farm you are, if you have 10 acres or 3,000 acres.
What we offered to farmers, starting mostly with smaller farmers because they were more amenable to ideas, was information, instruction on sustainable practices, markets. We would help them get in the door of places they could not now even talk to the buyers of, from major supermarkets like Kroger, which was one of our first successes, to farmers markets selling directly to consumers, to the international market. And you got to remember that organic is not, people say organic, well that's just, you don't use chemicals. Well, that's the least of it. You don't use chemicals, but what you do is build your soil. And modern agriculture, agribusiness, has gotten away from the notion that culture is the important side of that. And the soil is a culture. It's alive. And if you constantly poison it, yeah, you're killing the bug that might eat your cotton plant, but you're killing the other microorganisms that are in there and beneficial bugs along the way, and ultimately you're killing the soil itself. It's got to have those microorganisms. That's the life that is in the soil. And so organic means slowly building that soil back up so that it's got a productive capacity again. And we used a fellow out in West Texas, in Gaines County, way West Texas, and he was a sizable corn farmer and had 600 acres of corn and other commodities that he raised as well. And he came to us because he had been farming the conventional way, graduated out of Texas Tech, went back, took over the family farm, began to apply the chemicals and et cetera. And this was in the mid 1980s, early to mid, and that was a farm crisis time. Still is. The TV cameras don't cover it today, but the farm crisis is still there. Back then they were covering it. So we had tractorcades and farmers going broke, and he was penciling it out at his kitchen table and said, "I'm going broke." And then he felt bad. He said, "My daddy survived the drought of the 1950s on this farm. My granddaddy survived the Depression, and I'm going to lose the farm, you know. So that's a very personal and hard thing for family to absorb. So he began to kind of fidget around and figure, you know, well, what else can I do? You know, what could I be doing? And he came across some material on sustainable agriculture practices. And like farmers do, they experiment all the time. They're in their kitchen or out in their shed. They're trying to figure this or that out, you know, and it may be a new tool. It might be a new way of plowing. They listen to other farmers, and they look for an edge. Even in the good times, they're looking for an edge. Well, these were bad times. And so he began to call people around the country. Well, what's this stuff, you know, and can that really work? And then what he ultimately did was to begin to, he quit the chemicals. They were costing him a bundle. It's extraordinarily costly to buy the chemicals and then to apply them. And he decided he was going to quit it, and he was going to raise corn organically. And he went and got some of that manure that's piled up out there in the feedlots. You know, so much manure that they can't know what to do with it. So he began to take it and plow it into his soil. And everybody laughed at him, you know, the county agent scoffed at him at the cafe. Well, there's old Mr. Organic, you know. And sure enough, his first year, his yield was cut in half. His corn yield was cut in half. But he understood that was going to happen, and he kept at it. And in the second year, his yield was only a fourth less than it had been. And then the third year, his yield was 25% higher than it had been before. And it was costing him way less money, and he was getting a premium price, an organic price, on the corn. So he turned his farm around in a 3-year period. Now what was going on there was the soil was building up. The soil had to gain tilth, the essence of which is to sustain the plant, so you got strong plants. It's got the microorganisms and nutrients in there, so the plant itself is absorbing more nutrients, so you got a better product, more fruit, and so the culture side of agriculture begins to take over, and we forget that we've forgotten that lesson that my Uncle Ben Fletcher knew. I think that agriculture is the art and science of cooperating with nature, not of overwhelming nature. But the powers in our agriculture policy area, those who are the middlemen, those who make the chemicals, sell the machinery, who own the seeds and patent the seeds and manipulate the seeds, are the ones who make policy in Washington, most state capitals. Those powers don't see the change coming, and they're dead set against that change coming. But it's coming because the customers are saying, we want food that is clean. And that means we want the least amount of chemicals in it. We don't want it genetically altered. We don't want it overly processed. We want a good, what's called a pure food system. And by customers, I mean Republicans living in North Dallas. This is what they want, because they don't want putting poison in their babies' mouths. This is why markets like Whole Foods and the Central Market here in Austin and Wheatsville Co-op and the Pure Food markets all around Texas and all around the country are the fastest growing markets that there are in the food industry, because people with money are in there looking for that kind of a product.